Every legend begins with a lie, or, in Alexander's case, a prophecy. His mother, Olympias, didn't just tell him he was a prince, she told him he was a god. She claimed that, on the night of his conception, a bolt of lightning struck her womb. To her, Alexander wasn't the son of King Philip II of Macedon. He was the son of Zeus. Imagine being 7 years old and being told the king of the gods is your father. That creates a specific kind of person, a dangerous kind. While the rest of Greece was writing plays and debating philosophy in Athens, Alexander was in the mud of Pella. Macedon was the Wild West of the Greek world. It was a land of hard drinkers, mountain warriors, and blood feuds. His father, Philip II, was a genius of carnage. He took a broken, backwater kingdom and turned it into a professional killing machine. He invented the Macedonian Phalanx. Most Greek spears were 7 feet long. Philip's spears were 18 to 20 feet long. It was a wall of bronze and wood that no one could get near. Alexander didn't just watch this happen, he lived it. He saw his father's eye get gouged out by an arrow, his leg shattered, his shoulder smashed. By the age of 13, Alexander was being tutored by Aristotle, the greatest mind in history. By 16, he was ruling Macedon while his father was away at war. And at 18, he led the decisive cavalry charge at the Battle of Gaugamela that broke the back of Greece. But the father and son hated each other. Philip saw a rival. Alexander saw a man stealing his glory. Then in 336 BCE, at a wedding, the king is assassinated in front of the entire court by a bodyguard with a hidden blade. At 20 years old, the crown is placed on Alexander's head. Most kings start with a coronation. Alexander started with a purge. He executed his cousins, his rivals, anyone who could touch the throne. The boy was gone, the king had arrived, and he was hungry. The Greek city-states thought Alexander was a joke. They called him the boy. Thebes, a city of legendary warriors, rose in rebellion. They thought the Macedonian Empire would crumble without Philip. They were wrong. Alexander marched his army 250 miles in 14 days. He appeared at the gates of Thebes like a ghost. He didn't just defeat them, he erased them. He leveled every building in the city to the ground. He sold 30,000 people into slavery. He left only the house of the poet Pindar standing just to show he was cultured while he committed genocide. This was the Alexander message. He didn't want your respect. He wanted your terror. With Greece silenced by fear, he turned his eyes east, toward the sun, toward the Persian Empire. The Persian Empire was the largest the world had ever seen. It stretched from modern-day Turkey to Egypt to the borders of India. It had more money, more men, and more history. To invade Persia was suicide. Alexander had 40,000 men. The Persians had millions. He didn't care. He crossed the Hellespont, threw a spear into the Asian soil, and declared it won by the spear. There was no plan B. He burned his boats. It was conquest or death. The first major clash, the Granicus. The Persian governors sat on the high banks of the river, waiting. They expected Alexander to wait for morning to attack. Instead, Alexander charged into the water in the middle of the afternoon. He wore a helmet with 2 massive white plumes. He was a beacon for every Persian javelin. The battle that followed was an absolute bloodbath. Alexander was almost killed. A Persian axe actually split his helmet open. But his friend Cletus, the Black, saved him at the last second. Alexander won the battle, but the real test was Issus. This was the first time Alexander faced Darius III. the king of kings, Darius brought a massive army into a narrow mountain pass. He thought he had trapped the Macedonian brat, but the narrow space worked against the Persians. Their numbers meant nothing if they couldn't deploy. Alexander saw a gap in the Persian line. He didn't send his men, he went himself. He led the companion cavalry in a V-shaped wedge, screaming straight for Darius's chariot. Darius looked into the eyes of this blonde teenager covered in blood and saw a demon. Darius fled. He left his mother, his wife, and his children behind. Now, we have to talk about Tyre. This is the part of the story that proves Alexander was not a normal human being. Tyre was a fortress island, half a mile out in the Mediterranean Sea. They laughed at Alexander. "You have no navy," they said. "You can't touch us." Alexander's response: "Fine, I'll build a road to you." He forced his army to build a massive molar-land bridge through the ocean. For 7 months, they labored under fire. When they reached the walls, the massacre was so horrific that even the Macedonian veterans were shaken. Alexander had broken the unbreakable city. Next was Egypt. They didn't even fight. They crowned him pharaoh. They called him a god. But Alexander didn't want a crown. He wanted the king of kings. And on October 1st, 331 BCE, Alexander would get that chance. Darius had chosen the ground this time, a flat, wide plain. He had scythed chariots with literal swords spinning on the wheels. He had war elephants. He had 200,000 men. Alexander's generals were so terrified they suggested a night attack. Alexander refused. He said, "I will not steal my victory." He slept soundly that night. When they woke him, he put on his armor and looked at the horizon. The battle was chaos. The dust was so thick you couldn't see the man next to you. Alexander used a pawn sacrifice strategy. He tilted his entire army to the right, forcing Darius to thin out his center to follow him. The moment the gap opened, Alexander wheeled his cavalry and struck like a lightning bolt. Once again, he wanted Darius, but Darius fled again. But this time, there was no coming back. The Persian Empire, a 200-year-old superpower, collapsed in a single afternoon. Alexander was now the king of Asia. This is where the hero becomes a villain. Alexander didn't just conquer Persia, he became Persian. He started wearing their clothes. He started demanding proskynesis, the ritual, where people had to bow and kiss the ground before him. To his Macedonian soldiers, this was blasphemy. They were free men. They didn't bow to anyone. The paranoia set in. Alexander executed his most loyal general, Parmenii. He murdered Cletus, the Blackthor man who saved his life at Granicus in a drunken rage with a spear. He pushed his army into India. He wanted to find the outer ocean. He wanted to find the edge of the world. At the Hydaspes River, he fought King Porus and a terrifying army of war elephants. The Macedonians won, but the cost was too high. They were in the middle of a monsoon. Their clothes were rotting, their swords were rusting, and they heard that across the next river there were thousands more elephants waiting. For the first time in 15 years, the army said no. Alexander locked himself in his tent and wept. He called them cowards, but he had no choice. The world was too big, even for him. The march back through the Gedrezine desert killed more of his men than any battle ever did. By the time he reached Babylon, Alexander was a shell of a man. His best friend, Hephaestion, had died. Alexander had gone mad with grief, executing doctors and banning music. In June 323 BCE, after a massive drinking bout, he fell ill. He lay paralyzed for 10 days. His soldiers, heartbroken, were allowed to walk past his bed in a single file line. He couldn't speak, he could only move his eyes. When they asked who should lead, he said, "To the strongest." He died at 32. He had no heir. Within hours, his generals began killing each other. His empire was torn to pieces. But Alexander didn't care about an empire, he cared about a name. For 2,000 years, every conqueror, Caesar, Napoleon, Patton, has lived in his shadow. He proved that one person with enough will, enough violence, and enough belief in their own divinity can tilt the axis of the world. He was a monster. He was a god. He was Alexander the Great. In the next episode, his generals turn on one another and the world burns again. Subscribe to Elemental History and check out our entire library.